Hey, you're Addison, Brazil.
Yeah, I am. Hi, random British guy.
Didn't you write First Year at Grief Club, a gift from a friend who gets it?
Yes, I did. Did my mom pay you to ask me that?
No, I'm sorry for your loss, mate. Why don't you do a podcast to help people honor their grief?
You know, you're not the first person to say that. You know what? Fine, I'll do it. But it has to be with my friends who get it. And it has to be for real people who get real life grief. Oh, and it absolutely has to be equal parts honor the journey and find the funny.
What does that mean?
I think you're about to find out. I'm Addison, Brazil. Grief Club, the podcast starts now.
It's that finality of the loss of the physical life and being. That's what everyone focuses on around grieving, I feel like, in modern society. The grief that I am struggling with more, that is going to be the bigger challenge for me, is not knowing him and having that relationship. And I have accepted that. Obviously, I've known that since 2008, as we've slowly been losing him. But even though I've accepted that, there is such sadness around the lack of that presence. That's the grief that you said that I think will just be with me. And that's okay, because I know that grief is love, right? Just like anger is love, grief is love. They're usually secondary emotions stemming from something deeper. And in this case, it's the loss of love that I had for my dad. And so I'm in the process, because I'm only a week in, I'm in the process of grieving the finality of his physical life, as I've been grieving the rest of him over the last, 8+ years when it got really intense. But there's a separate category of sadness that I'll carry and I'll almost honor, like you said, because it's that appreciation for the love that I didn't get to continue to share with him. And that's okay.
Welcome back to another episode of Grief Club, the podcast, where I take chapters from my book, First Year of Grief Club, a gift from a friend who gets it, and use them as a launching point to have deeper conversations with special guests and friends. And today is both of those things. Today we're focusing on week 5. Week 5 brings in this idea of what you focus on expands. And my offering for week 5 goes into the idea of noticing and just putting your noticing tool in your grief toolkit and taking the time to just really notice where your attention's going, what you're focusing on, and asking yourself just gently and kindly, do we want this thought to expand? So when thinking about that, I wanted to have my friend and coach, Ashley Reed, on to chat with me. And again, as always, Grief Club members know that this is a launching point. Sometimes we go all the way around and don't even talk about the exact thing, but that's okay too. But I would love just to get started, if you've joined me, just to check in with you. I put these emotional check-ins throughout the book, Ashley. So if you're down, I'd love to ask you, how are you feeling in one word physically?
Grounded.
I'm gonna say light. How are you feeling in one word mentally?
Unrest.
Excited. How are you feeling in one word emotionally?
Mixed.
Safe. And I'm gonna say, I didn't feel those things until I popped on here and saw your face. So that's definitely a switch from like even 15 minutes ago, when my inner critic was showing up big time. Anyway, I would love to start off by just letting you kind of honor your journey openly, just taking a few minutes to really let the guests get to know you as well or not as well as I do. That's your choice. But yeah, what does Ashley's journey look like?
Yeah, I love it. And I love what you said just before too, because I think that's the power of check-ins. We can change so quickly in terms of what's going on inside of us. And it's great to do those check-ins because a few minutes could make a big difference. So I love what you just said. Yeah, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So to just give a little background on myself, I spent 18 years working in corporate marketing, mostly in sports and entertainment. And then I finished my career in tech with Amazon as head of global events for Amazon advertising.
And throughout that time, I just always felt like things weren't fitting, like there was something missing, something deeper that would give me more meaning and fulfillment. And so I started building businesses while I was still in corporate to give me some financial space. I built a real estate investment and management company, and I started investing in cryptocurrency. And then I also got my coaching certification and started working in high performance coaching. And I absolutely loved the awareness and potential work. And so when I left corporate, I took some space for myself. I had some really intense burnout that actually led to a near-death experience. And so I really took some space for my health and ended up doing my own deeper inner work. And that transitioned into working with high performers and coaching, but working with them more on their inner work and their awakening work, finding that meaning and purpose. And so that's what I do now. And that's my main focus. And I absolutely love it.
I love that. And we will probably have you back again when we get to the end of the Grief Club year and we talk about meaning and purpose, because you're also just so much wisdom there. I would love to hear, what is your, if I walked up to you on the street and said, hey, Ashley, what is grief? How would you respond to that?
You know, the first word that comes to me is loss. And I think it's going to show up differently for everyone, but the ways that I've experienced grief have usually been rooted in some form of loss. And so I think it's that heavy emotion that comes with loss for me, and that usually also attached to love. You know, that's one of the things I'll touch on more as we chat, but that I've learned about grief is that it's usually loss of love, whether that's a person, a thing, something, something around yourself. That's how I experience it.
I love that. And I love everybody I talk to, it really is expanding. Like that was one of my missions with the book, was to like take it off just a physical death and start to acknowledge this idea of grief, like with the loss of anything meaningful. And it just like, it's coming up more and more that people are realizing it. I feel like the pandemic was definitely an opportunity for us all to like identify grief as it sat in the room with us, as we sort of had these losses of things that are meaningful. So I love that. In honoring your journey, is there a grief process or a grief that you'd want to share at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's so important to share them. You know, one of the things that I learned, so the biggest grief that I'm still dealing with is my dad is in the late stages of early onset dementia. And, you know, he was young when it started around 12 years ago. He's 76 now. And I ignored it for a long time. You know, I actually didn't even tell my friends what we were dealing with as a family, because it was so hard to acknowledge it. If I spoke it out loud to other people, I had to deal with the emotion that was coming with it. And I was just not prepared or ready to do that. And so I think a big part of it is just acknowledging it and owning it and removing that judgment from it. Like, this is bad. This is a bad feeling. No emotions that we experience are bad. It's so important to create a relationship with them. I call my relationship with grief now beautiful, because with my dad, it's challenging. All grief is challenging. That's not a comparison statement, but it's ongoing. You know, he's still with us physically, but that is it at this stage. And so every day there is some sadness around that, some days more than others. So it's about embracing that sadness, knowing that it's coming from love. And when I feel that, really feel it and release it rather than storing it. And that's been super important to me in terms of my relationship with it.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And one of I guess right now I would be admitting that these are filmed out of order because I'm foreseeing the future.
They're getting a look behind the curtain.
We do have Shelley Paxton on, and I'm just realizing there's so many parallels between both of your stories. I mean, she was CMO of Harley Davidson and left that to do deeper inner work and write her book and whatnot. And she's dealing with a very similar ongoing pre-grief grief process almost with, you know, with her own father as he's ailing. So it's just, yeah, that really resonates. And that's come up a lot, is this idea of grieving something that's not tangibly over, or a physical death. There's that part of you that's the hope monster is going to show up and still be like, we can fix this, we can change this, we can, you know. And I do feel for that. I mean, I know that I was never successful at any sort of real pre-grief when my brother had cancer. Like, I mean, I just, as much as I thought I was preparing in any way, there was still a bigger part of me that was like, we can get this back. No, we can get this back.
Yeah,
We're tied in
course.
this series. We can win. You can always win. And it's so interesting how that really does flow. And it's actually kind of a perfect launching point, into this conversation today. Is like, I just remember the first time someone, and not by someone, my badass mentor, Jen Merrifield, said to me,
Love it.
what you focus on expands. And I felt this like huge weight of responsibility. Like as soon as because I'm quick, hyperactive thinker, like intellectually, I get pretty much every concept that can be offered when it comes to sort of mindset training and inner ego. The intellectual is never the hard. It's when we go into the lab and have to actually apply it, right?
Right.
And then, as you know too, I kind of, do become like this kid in church who's like also a little bit like, okay, well, I'm going to have fun with it if it's going to be this difficult. But I remember specifically in my grief process, it was something I wanted to introduce to people fairly early in the book, because I feel like I could have skipped a lot of suffering and a lot of sort of unintentional labeling and ruminating and dwelling, because I never really had this idea that like I can choose what I focus on. I mean, it was like, what do you mean? What have I been doing for 28 years? Why didn't you tell me this earlier? And a lot of that focusing, I really think, for me at least, like when I look back now, it was all ego. It was what what the ego wanted to focus on, and what the ego thought would keep me safe, or do what was right, or grieve properly, or all these things. So I love this idea, if someone's just new to this and they're just hearing about it, like how you kind of come at it from the Ashley angle.
Yeah, I absolutely love everything you're saying, because it is right. I love what you said too. Awareness is a big responsibility. We have these moments of awareness and we can't go back, even if we want to. Sometimes once you have a big awareness, you can think like, ignorance was bliss. Now I carry this responsibility to deal with that awareness. But as you settle into that, it becomes such a powerful tool. And I think for me, it's been focusing on the love. I think love is this underlying emotion that is usually under almost all. I don't like absolutes because I think they usually prove wrong, but overall, I think it's underneath so much anger and sadness and grief. It's usually something that is messing with your values, messing with something you love, a loss of something you love, conflict with who you are. And all of that stems in love. And so I really try to, throughout this grief with my dad, I try to focus on the love. When I feel sad, I let myself feel that and release it, because you don't want to push it away, because you don't push it away, you push it down. It stores that emotion in your body. But then I come back to this place of, why am I so sad? I'm sad because I love my dad so much, and losing him is hard. And I actually felt warmer when I said that statement, because I'm feeling into the love that's driving that grief. And so I think if you can have your mindset and your focus move into what's the source underneath that grief, what's the love that's either lost or being put in a conflict place because of whatever is going on that's causing the grief. I think it can be really powerful.
I love that. And one thing, I mean, I'll just speak as, a member of the grief arena. I think this comes up for a lot of people, and a lot of people are so scared of talking about it that they don't talk about it. But anytime there is a real sense of grief or death, especially in my life, I have to admit, like my ruminating, my like what I'm focusing on over and over again is sometimes my own death. Like the idea that I have to accept that I will die. And like, even as I'm saying this, I'm like, Addison, stop talking, like I'm like,
That's
stop it. But it is something that's just becomes this palpable thing in the room that suddenly like, it's kind of like the gift bag you never wanted with the other stuff you never wanted. Like, when as you're leaving a funeral, it's like, oh, and by the way, you're going to die too. And it's like, wait, what? Like, and I do find myself, even to this day, with all the tools that I have and everybody that I've ever worked with, it's like, that's the big one. And how much of that, like, would you say, like, where is that like coming from in terms of like ego? And like, that's a hard one to disrupt. So if you were going into the next high level, I mean, everyone knows this podcast is about me strong arming my successful friends into helping us.
Love it.
But if I was like, really, if I was working with you, and, obviously I'm a high achiever and still, fully functioning and doing all my work and all that stuff, but it's like, I just really can't stop focusing on this idea of my own death. Like, what would that sort of, the breakdown of that sort of look like with you?
Yeah. And I mean, I think first of all, it's great to accept that as normal.
Mm,
Because what happens is our ego comes in and is like, why are you thinking about this? Stop thinking about this. That judgment comes in trying to pull your focus away, but it's not really doing that. It's the ego disguised as something trying to pull your focus away. It's actually creating more focus on it. So I think the first thing when you have those moments, and we all have them, I mean, what you're saying is so true. It brings mortality to the forefront, whether that's for you or other people in your life that you love that are still with you. That's happened for me too. I've thought a lot about my mom
mm,
because of my dad. And look, I'm tearing up even saying that. It's hard to think about that. And I even have a different relationship with how I see death with some of the inner and spiritual work I've done, but it's still challenging to think of not having her physical presence here with me
mm,
anymore. So I think the first thing is to meet yourself with compassion and empathy. Don't let the judgment come in around like, why am I doing this again? I don't want to think about this. Meet yourself with compassion and empathy. And then see if in the meantime you can shift focus to, well, what can I do while I'm living? How
mm,
can I make this the most meaningful life that I can make it? Shift your head away because this is ego. Ego wants us to focus on the hard things, the bad things, the things that create more judgment. So if we can shift our focus away from that, we're also quieting the ego and moving outside of it. So there's a larger piece there that's around deeper inner and spiritual work that
mhm.
shifts the way we see mortality overall, but that can be a longer process. And I think in the meantime, the ability to recognize it, which you are, is always the first step. Release the judgment, meet yourself with compassion and empathy. I see why I'm doing this right now because this is hard. I don't want
Mhm.
to lose the people I love. I don't want to think about my life ending. It's hard and that's okay. And then move into, but I have this beautiful life. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to live it to the most? I think those are some really powerful short-term in the
Mhm.
moment tools that you can use.
And I will say that like in this week that we're launching off of, like I did specifically offer an experiment in noticing. Like I didn't
Mm,
say in judgment,
love it.
to look
Yeah.
at, what, because that can, like we said, it comes with sort of, can feel like someone's wagging a finger at you to be like, what you focus on expands. And it's like this little, like, I picture this like sarcastic side of myself. It's like, well, you're fucking yourself. I
Yeah, like
guess
there
that's
you
the first
go.
time I've ever said the F word on this podcast. So I guess it's officially a podcast where you could say the F
My
word.
fault if I brought it out of you.
No, I mean the release of, or was that the release of ego or the presence of ego? I don't know.
Either way.
But yeah, like it's so easy. So I love what you're saying. It's like just like not getting caught up in the judgment of it. Because again, I feel like that's still ego. It's giving you something to do rather than deal with what you're focusing on. It's like
Exactly.
I can hate myself for judging myself, and I still don't have to deal with the thing that's coming up for me. It's almost like
Exactly.
it's helping you in a way that doesn't serve you.
Right. Because what you want to do then in terms of deeper inner work is keep getting underneath that fear.
Mm,
And it seems like, oh, well, logically, of course, I'm afraid to die because it's the end. But there's much more to it. It's a much more complex topic than that spiritually. And
mhm,
so with inner work, you want to get to the like eighth why underneath of that. Why am I afraid of that? Why is this bothering me? Why is that answer my truth right now? Because a lot of times the first 3 to 6 whys, I think we've talked about this, the first 3 to 6 whys can be your ego. It builds a lot of
mm,
layers on top of the truth to try to keep you spinning and playing in this ego and mind space. So you're exactly right. The ego comes in and its focus is distraction. And the easiest way to distract us is to poke at our fears. Right. And
mm.
so if one of your biggest fears, and as for all of us, right, it's super normal to have one of our biggest fears be of death and mortality. Poke, poke, poke. And then it keeps you right up here and you can't get down to that source and truth where you can heal and create a different relationship with whatever the fear is.
I'm sort of like laughing to myself because like I did even today, I was like, should I cancel this? It's never sunny in London. Maybe like, but it's also technically a holiday because we're on bank holiday or Good Friday or whatever you call it, wherever
Yeah.
you are. But I had all these reasons and I was like, there's never been more clear that you should talk to Ashley today. Like my ego has just been,
I love
and it's
it.
been
Good for
everything you're
you.
saying. Like I will say like 13 years in the grief arena, like, and I know these tools and I know what's happening and it still gets me. Like this isn't like you learn this and then you're good and you get your pass and it goes away. This is like every day this is going to show back up and every day you're going to have to gently remind yourself what's happening, to notice without judgment, and then make that conscious decision to shift your focus. And I know there's going to be people that are like nodding and going, thanks for the reminder, because they know this and then they're doing it. And there's going to be people that are like, oh, that sounds easy, just change what I'm thinking about, and it's like,
Right.
and it's one of those things, until you start to experiment and take the offering in of just noticing, you really, it's like you're slowing down time. You're like seeing it happen. And once you really see it happen, it's there. But I will say that, like, especially actually in the last 2 weeks for me, my ego is just like right there, judging everything I'm doing, every decision I'm making. And I'm having this like odd experience where my ego or inner critic, is sort of, it's like babysitting two kids. My inner child is palpably in the room with me, and my ego is also. And it's actually like I'm sort of stepping back and noticing like just
Watching
the conversation back and forth, and like, no, more achievement, another book like this, these metrics, from one side, and this other side going, how many things do we have to do till we just focus on love? Like, wasn't the point of losing all of this to learn that love is so important? And it's like, truly, like, it feels like my 11-year-old self is like looking at me saying this, and I can't ignore that kid. And it's I've never had both at the same time, where I'm noticing both so strongly. So it's like a really cool thing to be like, wow, you really are kind of like, and I was an older sibling, so I can say this, but like that was sort of, even though my younger brother was the most like agitating, that was his game, was just, let's see when they snap. Like, this week on When Will Addison Snap? You really just notice that, like, how like there's these two parts of you that are just sort of always going to be at odds. And it really is like how people always say, oh, when you grow up, you guys will like never even think about when you fought as kids. Like, it's like when you get to that level where those things can be in harmony. But that seems really unlikely for a really long, long time, that these two parts of you are gonna kind of work together.
It does. And I think too, everything you're explaining is so normal. And what I want to say to you, which, your ego will most likely be mad at this, but it's a great sign that this is happening, because this is what I call the internal conflict and duality. This is the step before you're ready for more healing. When you can actually see these two fighting, and what's happening right now is inside of you, they're fighting for control. Your true self is trying to pull you back down here and remind you, you don't need anything external to feel whole, complete, love, to feel freedom. That all exists inside of us. It's our ego, when it's developed, that comes in and tries to convince us that something is missing. And we need this extra thing to experience all of those things, like love and freedom and completeness. And so when you feel this duality and these two kind of fighting inside of you, you're at that stage where it's coming to the surface, and there's an opportunity for some more healing work and inner work around it. And I want to challenge you a little bit too, because I believe, because I'm living it, there is a way to calm that. There is a way to create a different relationship with your ego. It is really challenging, and it can take some time depending. But the beautiful thing is once you heal everything, there's nothing for your ego to mess with you around. And you can then recreate that relationship with your ego, because we always want to remember too, it's so easy to think of the ego as bad with how we all talk about it, myself included, right? But bad in itself is an ego judgment. It doesn't exist unless we assign that meaning. And in general, our ego is coming from a place of protection. It's just thinking, how can I protect them? So I can keep them trapped in these thoughts so that they don't feel what they're, what's going on inside of them that would hurt them, or I can keep them focused on this so they don't realize that actually they have everything they need. I'll keep telling them they need something out here to feel better. And so the ego is coming from protection. It's just not always doing it in a way that serves us the best. So as we heal and we don't have triggers that it can activate anymore, we then can create a different relationship with our ego and tell it, this is how I want you to protect me. This is how I want you to show up. So there is a place of peace with all of it. It just takes some time. Then it takes going to those deep, deep levels within us where we might have even thought we healed, but we haven't fully healed yet.
Yeah, that's why I'm nodding, because I will say, for anyone listening, like, again, I wrote a book, How You Cannot Fix Grief or Mental Health, You Can Only Honor It. And yet every time this ego is trying to show up fixing things. But I've definitely had that moment and that feeling. And there's honestly, I've experienced grief around wanting to get it back when things shift and things change. And there's sort of, this Trojan horse of like, okay, I'm really approaching, everything that's coming into my life, my last job, my last relationship, everything I built from about 2 years ago before, or right after, I said before, right after I had a sort of a suicidal moment. Not sort of, I don't know why my brain is doing that. It's very much real, and I very much honor that is normal. But coming out of that, the healing that I did as I approached each thing, I really did feel it was that place. And then I will openly admit now that, as things shifts, you build a company, you leave a company, as everything kind of has shifted for me. And honestly, I thought the book was going to be like a gift to my ego and it was going to leave me alone. I was like, something is published, it exists, people have it in their homes, it's validated. And that's not what happened at all. Like, it was just like, you are a monster. Like you will never stop eating. Like, okay, I see, like, it's been this real, and that's why what's been funny about like it being the noticing week is the reason I bring this up is like, I've actively really not tried to quiet either voice, but to really hear what this conversation is. Because of course, on one side, what the older sibling is saying, this ego, and that's just the way I see it, but, is really saying, we need to have security. You need to do certain things, all those needs, and, you should do this and should, need. Yeah, I hear it. And then, for this other side of the conversation. And so it's like, well, I haven't listened to both sides of this in a long time, and if anything, I've probably, as soon as I felt like, oh, I'm in a place of peace and a place of healing, and I went back into the world, it was like slowly, that ego was coming back. And so it's just kind of like, right now, it feels like I'm almost detoxing or cleansing. Like, it's just like, I had no idea. It was like if someone told you, for me, it feels like, and this might be a terrible metaphor, but this is my home and it's a safe space. The podcast, I'm not in my real home. But funny enough, it's not my home. Literally, it's not my home. But it's like somebody, you think you've kicked a habit, and then someone tells you, well, actually, you've been getting up in the middle of the night and doing that every night for over a year. And you're like, what? No. And it's like, damn. And
it's
it does.
so hard.
First thing the ego does is turn it into a failure.
Judgment.
Judgment.
It is so hard. It's such a beast. And look, so here's the thing about this, because this is a hard one. I've been experiencing a version of that the last few weeks, because I have a bad injury. I've been like cooped up. I had to cancel a bunch of travel I was excited about, and these old vices came back trying to comfort me. Like I used to have an eating disorder in terms of binge eating, and that's come back because I'm like, I need comfort. And then judgment comes in, because it's like, I thought I healed and released that. And so the beautiful thing of this, and I know that's a tough word to use around this, is that it's because, so I think a great way to look, you're never going backwards. What can happen is it feels like you're going backwards when you're re-experiencing things, but you're actually continuing to progress. You're just going deeper. There's something more challenging that you're experiencing in this new situation. And so these old patterns show up as a way of giving you relief or creating this, these conflicting thoughts, but it's just because you're getting deeper and you need to heal more to release it. And so with you, the book is such a perfect example of something like this, because it can feel like this culmination moment where you release it and everything's good, but you releasing that is such a powerful moment.
You've reached Grief Club. Leave a message after the beep.
Hey Grief Club, it's me again. Yeah, I know you probably thought you were going to get a break from listening to me talk, but I just wanted to check in and find out how I'm doing. I mean, really, you can be really honest with me. I'm like a different Addison from the Addison that's recording in this episode, because this is recorded at a different time, so you can tell me the truth. The best way to do that is to leave a review and like the podcast, but only if you like it. I really think it will help other people who need it find it, so I greatly appreciate you doing that. Back to me.
You sharing that, with the world is so powerful. That actually takes you deeper. And then you're in a different place where that can unlock more cracks. Think of it as like these layers of concrete that we start to chip through. You releasing that book, I would put money on the fact that it put a big crack in a new level there. And there's more that's coming up that needs to heal. And that creates this duality and conflict. And so doing what you're doing, watching, witnessing, creating awareness, experiencing are so huge and take so much strength. So I commend you for taking that approach with it. Self-inquiry and curiosity in moments like this are beautiful. Step back, watch like you are, create some space, and then get curious. Curiosity keeps judgment from creeping in. Why am I feeling this way? What is my ego trying to do here? What is it trying to protect me from? Why does it think I need that protection? What is my true self trying to pull me over to? What is its goal here? Get really curious and just keep going deeper, because there's some beautiful answers and potentially some more healing underneath what you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. And like you're saying, like the fact that too, that, you know, I don't want people to get to a point where, you know, it's like, oh no, this is coming back. But the fact that you're saying that you're noticing means you're on a totally different level than you used to be. The fact that you know that it's the ego, that you're calling it, even if you're going right back into judgment and whatever, you know, there's that moment where you're like, it's like, wait, celebrate that, because you never in the past would be like, oh, ego, oh, that's my, you know.
Right. And that's so huge. And don't let it tell you that's not existing. You know, that's to everyone listening, because you're already having that experience. But exactly right. It's so quick to do that, to say like, oh, you've gotten nowhere. Well, that's not true. You're experiencing and watching at the same time. That's a very different place to be in than subconsciously experiencing something, or only experiencing it with judgment. And so there's a lot of progress there. And also just rooting yourself. I had to do this because I went through this really profound, like, initial awakening in my deeper inner work. And as I was coming out of that, I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm awakened. Life is great. Everything's wonderful. And I did feel this bliss for a really long time. And then I moved into more processes as I was moving deeper. And I was like, oh, what is this? I thought I finished. And I think honoring and accepting and really seeing the beauty in the fact that this work is never done, you know, like you talk about also around grief, that it's just this deepening, it's this relationship, it's this ongoing process. And so then when things like this show up where you're going like this, you notice, say like, I'm not going backwards, I'm deepening. My process is continuing. And I think that mindset and that approach and that focus is really important also.
The ping that I'm getting to as you're saying that, like, just such a, you know, of course there are no accidents. I'm right where I'm meant to be having this conversation on this day. You know, but as you're saying that, I don't know why this is triggering this, but on my last day in Italy last year, we were like rushing to the airport, and our cab driver was just the loveliest guy, but we were like really worried, me and my friend I was traveling with, and, you know, all the things of just like, this is the most important thing we've ever done, is making this flight, you know. And he was saying, and he said to me, do you know why they keep saying piano, piano, like everywhere you go in Italy? And I was like, no. He's like, it means slowly, slowly. And we believe that we're all walking to our death, so why would you rush?
I just got goosebumps. How beautiful.
And I feel like that is so perfect for this. If you're a hyper thinker like I am, it's like, you don't need to do all this work with your ego like on a 24-hour clock, like you're getting to something, because we're not getting to that. We're not getting to that. We really are just, you know, it's like I say, Grief Club starts today, it starts and it ends never. And I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that, but telling you is the biggest gift I can give you, because then again, you can go slowly, slowly with it. This is not going anywhere. This doesn't have to be figured out today. You don't have to, and you probably won't conquer your ego like in a finite amount of time, because like you said, there's always sort of that next level. And I think that really can be something that turns into a hopeful statement and not an overwhelming one. But also only when you're ready. And so if listening to this, your grief and your ego is saying, that's a load of shit, I don't, you know, okay, that's what's being said right now.
That's powerful too.
To notice, it's just to notice. I think that's a crock of shit. Like when people would say everything happens for a reason to me, I'd be like, I think you're full of shit. And then we would, you know, and I just have to notice that, truthfully, honestly, that's where I was at when certain platitudes were said to me, especially in a grief process, where I was like, okay, I'm noticing that I think that is bullshit,
Yeah.
you know? And that's where, luckily, we like to end with Find the Funny every week. But like, that's where I really do say my sense of humor has been such a big part of this. And like, even if they're watching this on video, they'll see from my face, but it's like, I get both excited and sort of like find so many jokes in this type of work, because I do think if it's not fun, it's really not fun. So if you're not lovingly catching the ego and sort of laughing and going, oh, nice try there. Yeah, I saw that, you know, like it's really like, and that's why I love going back to this idea of it being your two children, you know, that inner child. And then people don't talk about this older child, but it's still your child. So even if you know, they're being a little brat, you would still kind of laugh and go like nice try, but like, and because there's so much of you in that too, you know. 100%. So it's that piece. And you know, but be nicer to your brother, you know, like it's like that. Exactly. You know, that thing where it's like, but there's not love around that. It is, you know, such a part of you in that way. And I forget that. I admittedly had forgotten that. And the point of today was clearly to just be reminded. One thing that's been really helpful for me as this has, because we're right in the middle of resurgence of this for me and my work, is just someone reminded me, you know, you're exactly where you're meant to be, and don't let anything else be true. And like, it is so weird when like all the ego stuff's coming in and you just repeat that back. And it's like, okay, so then what's going to happen here? What's about to happen here? What's going on, London? Like, you know, because it's like, well, if I'm right where I'm meant to be, then, you know, and it just, so there's this like, almost like, I feel like, you know, in the work that all of you guys do, and I just love talking to all of my friends that are like coaches like this, but there's almost like, it's almost like, you know, how you put medicine in for animals in those treats.
Yes.
Like, I feel like for your ego, there's a lot of those.
That's such a great analogy. Like, it's so true.
Here's your pill. And they're like, you're right where you're meant to be, baby.
Yeah, it's so true. Okay, it's so true. You know? I took the pill.
It's like, I've got 15 minutes, you know, I'm gonna like,
right. I got it.
So
and it's so true in general. If you think about it, like, you know, this is getting a little existential, but that's only because our ego tells us it is. It's the truth. We only have present moment. What our ego loves to do is pull us into the past, thinking about what happened, what could have been, what should have been, and pull us into the future. What do we need to do? What's going on out there? But really all we have is present moment. And so a statement like that brings you back into you are exactly where you need to be right now also pulls you back into present moment, which automatically quiets the ego. So that's a very powerful statement. And the slowing down part is so true too. I mean, I think it's just part of, and you do this so gracefully, embracing grief as part of the human experience. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but it's part of who we are as a human. And we need to be really careful to not let the ego create this assigned meaning for us around emotions being bad. Are some more challenging to experience? Definitely. Obviously, that's also part of being human. We feel things deeply. But they're not bad. That's all an ego creation. And so everything you're saying is so true and all comes back to the ego. And so the shift of focus that you're doing, this awareness around the moment, are such powerful ways to step out of that and move away from it.
I love that. And gosh, I'm like, okay, let's flip the page. Let's do the next one. Like, okay, what do you think about this, Ashley?
Let's go. We're a dangerous pair.
And we're a dangerous pair. And also, like, honestly, what I love about our relationship and our friendship and our working relationship when we're in a working environment is like, it really is living proof that like deep work can be done and you can have fun doing it. And I think that gets missed a lot in this world. And for me, like when I'm looking to hire a coach or work with somebody to facilitate my next level of healing, that is such an important part of me that they honor that. And that also don't try to like coachify it. Like my humor is such a beautiful part of my resilience toolkit. And so to be like, well, that joke's really about this. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, you know, comedians are actually very smart. Like they you know, they create these jokes from truth. Like, you know, that's why it's funny, because it's very, very, very true. And so if we can like allow that, you know, oh God, now I have a third child in the room, but if you can allow that to all these kids in this, they're just growing by the minute. I gotta get a nanny. But yeah, no, for real. What makes you laugh other than me?
You're spot on with all of this. I love it because the playfulness is so key. And this work also does make me laugh. It's part of it. And I think you gave good examples of that earlier. And I have this conversation with all of my clients when I start working with them around, we're going to play. I'll see my ego showing up and I'm like, oh, come on. You're really doing that again. Like, haven't we moved out of that? Why are we dealing with that? And you have to kind of laugh and embrace it. And so I think what you're saying is so true. Like, can everything we do be analyzed? Is there something underneath it? Yes. Should we be analyzing everything we do? No. And again, analyzing is usually your head. So what you want to do with inner work is move yourself out of your head, come into your body, because our consciousness has the real answers and the real healing. And so I think you touched on something really important that also stems into not letting this work become who we are. And I see that so often in our industry, and that takes the laughter and playfulness out of life, because you just wake up every day thinking about, how do you heal? What's the inner work? And it becomes an ego identity. The ego loves to play. And so it will try to find its way into even things like inner work and healing. And so we need to be really conscious to do exactly what you're doing. Find ways to laugh. Funny people make me laugh, when you have the same sense of humor.
Like being
right?
so bad right now. But it's just
I
so true
love it.
because it's like, I will go to the top of a mountain. I will go to like a plant healing ceremony. I will be coached beyond coaching. But if based on that experience, like I throw like a gold A joke about it and we can't laugh, like it's a red flag for me. Like
It is,
just
because
like
why
grief
can't they
is
laugh?
funny. Yeah. It's
Right?
like, what? Can this
if you-
be funny? Can
Yeah.
this be, yeah.
Can you let go and enjoy the moment? I think that's a lot of what it comes back to too, because if you can't, why? Even if you're a coach, is your head ego telling you you need to show up in this certain way to be a good coach and be professional? Let go of those identities. Life is funny, even the hard stuff. We have to learn to laugh at ourselves. And whether that's through people that we have the same sense of humor or experiences, whatever it is, it's so important. I honestly have always said, even before inner work, that laughter is a medicine. I feel so much better after a weekend with my best friends that are absolutely hysterical. It's like I was in therapy for 20 years.
I didn't know in the first 5 minutes if we were going to be able to do this because my face, my cheekbones started swelling. Anybody who watches the video, because you're like one of those people that I just want to go right to the find the fight and have fun with, because we have that connection. But it's like, I have to say, like, I'm really noticing that, like, that is my favorite feeling on earth. Like that, like, oh no, I can't not laugh. I can't, and why would I not? Because sometimes it gets so rare in adulthood, it gets rare in grief. It's like, I don't have like the time to give up like these like laughing fits. Like, how many times as an adult do you like laugh until you cry, So it's like, I'm really trying to invite that in more and more and be like, sorry, we got to stop and just like, because I'm, maybe it's just triggering my own grief and I'm turning into
No, it's beautiful. I think it's like, we're human. And I truly believe, like, again, if we think about that, we are our true self and our ego is created by our mind. And then it buries us underneath these layers that it creates. Our true self just wants to play and have fun. It's already whole and complete and free. It doesn't need anything else. So it loves to laugh and play and enjoy life. And so, yes, sometimes can there be moments where laughter is used to hide from something? Potentially. And that's okay. Always have awareness around it, because maybe you can learn from the experience. But at the same time, just enjoy it, whatever the reason. Laughter is so healthy. I love how you integrate it. And I agree. I've learned, there was not a lot of laughter in my roles at Amazon or in my executive roles. And not to say I didn't work with amazing people. I love the people I worked with, but I have learned in this job, same thing, even my clients, we have to be able to laugh and play and enjoy what we're doing, because who wants to come and show up for work every day that makes you miserable? It can be hard and playful and fun at the same time. I fully believe that. And you do a beautiful job teaching and embracing that.
Thank you. And I do believe, for everyone listening today too, that if you're like not connecting at all with, like, how are they having so much fun and talking about grief? And, I do think, for very specifically, this noticing tool is truly a key to your humor and to reigniting your sense of humor. Because there are just moments where when you're just noticing and it's like you have a thought and it's like, maybe if I eat a pizza, that will go away. And then you're like, really? You think a pizza is gonna fucking save you right now?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So
it's
true.
Like, that can be so funny. You know what I mean?
Can
It
be.
can also lead to like laughing into tears immediately.
Yeah,
because
which is
you're
also
like,
great.
yeah, I do think a
Right?
pizza can save my life right now. Okay. And I'm like, then order the damn pizza. I'm not gonna get your way.
Right.
But
Well,
like
yeah, I've done that a few times recently, right? You also learn like when is am I ready to fight this in this moment? Or is right now the right thing for me to do? Just to give in and be compassionate with myself, right? That's
Yeah.
all also about this noticing and awareness. But I love it. It's so true. And if you feel a lot of resistance to what we're saying, I also say to my clients and in this work, resistance is our greatest tool and asset. If we feel a strong head resistance towards something, we are triggering our ego. So get really curious with compassion and empathy, not judgment, as to why, and go deeper and deeper, because there's a source underneath that hasn't healed, or a belief that no longer serves us. So I love resistance. The angrier you get, the more frustrated. When you have resistance, it's just an arrow to exactly where we have the opportunity to go deeper.
I love that. I think there's no better way to end than with laughs and then, that little deep cherry on top. Deep cherry.
And
What
more
is it?
laughs.
What is a deep cherry?
I was going to say, we have to end with laughs now after you said
yeah.
deep cherry.
Yeah, exactly. A deep cherry. Where can we find you? Because I have a feeling people will want to find you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. So I'm on Instagram at Ashley Reed Official, and also LinkedIn at Ashley Reed Official. And then if they want to reach out, you can find information to contact me on my website, which is www.ashleyreed.com.
And I'm such a, champion of conscious curation when it comes to like all of the sea of mess we have on social media. And I will say for anybody listening that Ashley's like in one of my top lists of, it's everything you post is like helpful and real as fuck. And like, when you go into this work, like you got to make that commitment to like it being for real life, because otherwise there can be a disconnect there. And I just find that like, I'm just constantly like, yes, more of this, please. More of this.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate
it. So
that.
Keep it up. And thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, Grief Club, that's the show. If you enjoyed it, please let us know by liking and leaving a review. This will help as many people who may need what we're talking about find it the fastest. Remember to honor the journey, and when that gets tough, find the funny.